The U.S. added 254,000 jobs last month. That was beyond all estimates to the upside. Let's unpack it now with Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su. Secretary, it's great to have you with us. Of course, we have a lot of good news to talk about, from the upside surprise on payrolls, of course, the unemployment rate dropping, and of course, that port strike suspension. Let's start with the labor market, though, because as I mentioned, of course, beyond all estimates to the upside, and then you take a look at some of the details on the demographic level, even more good news when it comes to white, black, and Hispanic unemployment. Where do you see the greatest source of strength? What were some of the factors driving those improvements?
I think this has been the story of the economy under the Biden-Harris administration, frankly. Many people predicted that we would not be able to do this, have this kind of recovery, and have incredible job growth while keeping the unemployment rate low, while bringing down inflation and interest rates. All of those things are now happening. We saw growth in this last month in healthcare. We saw it in restaurants. We saw it in local government. All of these things translate into quality of life, right? It's not just workers out there doing jobs. It's, potholes are being fixed. It's, increased public safety. It's people getting back to normal, right? Remember, 4 years ago this time, a lot of restaurants were closed. Mm-hmm. Now it's the industry with incredible growth in the September report. It was back to school 4 years ago, back to Zoom, because we were in the middle of a global pandemic and there was no national strategy to get it under control.
Right.
4 years ago, kids were being told no trick-or-treating for Halloween. We're in a very different place right now, and that is in no small part because of strong leadership and economic policies that have helped to fuel an unprecedented economic recovery.
And Secretary, as you know well, a very strong report overall. If you were looking for some weakness, you would find it in the manufacturing sector, of course, shedding another 7,000 jobs. That was slightly better than estimate, but a contraction there nonetheless. And the downward revisions there were actually lower. So what is the administration doing to address what's going on in the manufacturing sector?
So here's the story of manufacturing. President Biden and Vice President Harris have been saying since day one, we believe we can make things in America again. We can open up factories that were shuttered in the last administration. I visited some of those, factories where people had to leave their community, leave their families to go find jobs elsewhere, that are being opened up again. But it also takes some time to reverse the really decades of disinvestment in our manufacturing industries. Now we're making historic investments now, and that's really showing up in the construction sector. And you got to build the manufacturing facilities before you can hire people into them. And so this is, even this jobs report, as great as it is not a declaration of victory. It's a declaration of progress. We are making significant progress, and we need to keep up that trend. We need to keep up that work. Manufacturing jobs have grown, but they're going to grow more as we keep investing in America.
Well, let's talk, of course, about the other piece of good news this morning, and that is that the 3-day strike at East Coast and Gulf Coast ports has ended. The contract extended through January 15th. I know that you were heavily involved in the negotiations. The New York Times reporting that you were in New Jersey yesterday, of course, meeting with the unions. Talk to us about how it happened in the end. What did you do? What did Secretary Buttigieg do? And what did Joe Biden do?
Look, this is another example of many in this administration of just how powerful and effective collective bargaining is. When workers have a voice at the table, when they have a union on the job, when they can come to the table, sit down with their employers and talk about what's good for them, what's good for their company. It's better for the economy. It's better for the nation. We've seen that from auto workers to airline flight attendants, from hospitality to healthcare, and now at the docks as well. And this was a situation where longshoremen who do difficult and often dangerous jobs worked through the pandemic, strapped the country on their backs, and have helped to fuel record profits. Shipping carriers have made tens of billions of dollars in profits over the last few years. Again, that's partly because the economy as a whole is strong.
Right.
So when the economy is strong, everybody benefits. And this is an example of how when workers have a voice, when collective bargaining happens, workers can get their fair share. And at the end of the day, when I was in New Jersey, when this was about to happen, the longshoremen were saying, let's get back to work right away. They were ready to go back last night. That's because working people understand how important they are. They understand their contributions, and they are showing showing up every day to make them. And we are really happy to see them getting their fair share.
Well, Secretary, it's a victory, but it's a partial victory because we're talking about an extension until January 15th. So what is still yet to be resolved here between now and January 15th?
Yeah, it's such an important point, right? Collective bargaining is a process. And you heard the president say this. I'm grateful to be in a cabinet of other people who are fully committed to the idea that we have to trust the parties. And now that they're coming back to the table, they're going to deal with all of the other issues that are on the table. And I have great faith that they're going to get to a fair contract and be able to move forward together to the important work of our supply chains and helping to continue to make sure we're the strongest economy in the world.
So you have great faith here, but I mean, is it possible that we're going to see this fall through in January, that we're going to see a return to the picket lines when you think about some of those issues that are still yet to be resolved?
Well, the vast majority of contracts, when they're being negotiated, end in a contract. I've been all across the country, both celebrating those outcomes and urging the parties to stay at the table. So the ones that we hear about are ones that become, more contentious. Now, a lot of times that is because workers for a long time have been falling behind. There have been, the economy in the last administration was not as strong as it is now. The contract for these longshoremen was negotiated in the last administration. Today, the economy, as demonstrated by the jobs report, is stronger. It's different. And so we believe, now the parties have resolved one of their big issues. The best way to get this done is for them to sit down together, and that's exactly what they're going to do.
All right, we really appreciate your time. As always, of course, know it's a busy morning for you. That is Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su.